Thanks for watching. If you find this encouraging, please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more gospel-centered content. Well, I think this is the fourth lesson in our world religions course. We started out by looking at Islam, and then we looked last week at Hinduism, and which these are sort of Christianity has the most adherents worldwide, then followed by Islam, followed by Hinduism, and then number 4 is Buddhism. So worldwide, there are between 500 and 550 million Buddhists. That's between 6 and 7% of the world's population. In the U.S., there's between 3 and 4 million. Georgia, these are kind of widespread numbers. Nobody knows for sure, but estimated between 60 and 100,000. In Tift County, we don't know. Hinduism, we have the Hindu temple here. I don't hear a lot about Buddhism here. I'm sure there are some Buddhists, and I'm sure there's a number of Americans who, Buddhism and Hinduism, and we'll see there's some distinct similarities as well as some differences, but I do find a lot of Americans, I say a lot, a decent number of Americans espouse bits and pieces of these philosophies. It is interesting when you begin to look at Buddhism, Buddhists even say, well, we're not sure is it most accurate to even call it a religion? They don't even technically believe in a creator God or worship a God or a deity. So is it a religion? It's definitely a religious practice, but is it a philosophy or is it a way of life? And of course, any Christianity, it is religion. There are philosophies associated with it, and it is most certainly a way of life. Can y'all think of any prominent American Buddhists? One I knew off the top of my head just from public news was Richard Gere, famous actor, Buddhist. Orlando Bloom, I did not know. And some of these folks would claim to be Buddhists. Some would claim to be heavily affected by Buddhist philosophy. Tina Turner. I think one of my favorite stories in this church is I think Bart went to a Tina Turner concert. That's awesome. You didn't know that was before you knew she was Buddhist. Yeah. I had never heard that before doing this research. Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple, studied Buddhism, and some of the tenets of Buddhism heavily influenced the simplicity of the design of the iPhone, played heavily into that. All right, so the origin of Buddhism, take a couple minutes on that, some of the beliefs of Buddhism, and then want to compare it to the tenets of Christianity. So that's what we're going to do. Buddhism began, like Hinduism, in India around the 5th or 6th century BC with the life of a man named Siddhartha Gautama, if I'm pronouncing that right. He is the person who came to be known as the Buddha, and which I think Buddha means enlightened one. He was born into a really wealthy family, a ruling family, and he was, the tradition has it that his father really insulated him from any type of knowledge of suffering growing up. At least he tried to. But then he wound up, learning about suffering, learning about death, and all this threw him into crisis and searching. He had seasons of major self-denial, major indulgence in things of life. And one day he was meditating under a Bodhi tree, and he attained enlightenment, gained insight into suffering, its causes, and the path to liberation. And from that point forward, he began to try to teach people how to become enlightened. And his teachings became known as the Dharma, which offered a practical path for other people to follow to reach enlightenment. Beliefs of Buddhism. If you a Buddhist will say, okay, if you want to understand Buddhism, it's really summarized in the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths, and one of them is and these all have names. I'm not. I don't want to be insulting to the religion, but the truth of suffering. Suffering is just one of the big realities. And now they're onto something with this. I mean, why suffering? Why death? Why do children die in infancy? Why is there so much pain and sorrow in the world? From a Buddhist perspective, all ordinary human life is marked by dukkha, which involves suffering, but it also involves this sense of unease, or this concept, and we all know this too, this inability to ever ultimately be satisfied, which from a Christian standpoint, we would all say, hey, that's the longing in the soul for Christ. Like the need in the soul. We're created in the image of God. So until we have that restored, you'll never have your longings satisfied. But even in this philosophy, even there's deep frustration because even the best of experiences can't fully satisfy. Then there's the truth of the cause of suffering, which is suffering is caused by desire, cravings, attachment, and ignorance. People desire pleasure, control, identity, and permanence in a world that cannot provide these things in a lasting way. And that leads people to clinging on to things, which produces frustration, conflict, and repeated dissatisfaction. And at the root of it, from a Buddhist perspective, is ignorance of reality. So let's pursue enlightenment. The third of the Four Noble Truths is the end of suffering. Suffering can come to an end when craving and ignorance are extinguished. This cycle of dissatisfaction is broken, and that's called nirvana, which is understood as liberation, peace, and freedom from the forces that bind a person to suffering, death, and rebirth. They have their own form of reincarnation, which is also called samsara, like Hinduism. The truth of the path. Now, this is the fourth noble truth, and the Buddhism teaches that there's a practical path that leads to the end of suffering. And this path, we're going to talk about, it's an Eightfold Path. The path involves right understanding, right intentions, right ethical living, right mental discipline, and meditation. And this Eightfold Path is the noble path. It's a practical framework for overcoming suffering and achieving liberation. But it's not a sequence of steps. I heard one person describe it as more like it's a wheel with a hub in the middle and the spokes. These 8 different spokes. And so it's like an integrated, all these things work together to help provide liberation. So the first one is a right view, a right understanding of reality as it truly is. So you have to understand, you have to have a right view of all of these different truths, a right view of the 4 noble truths, a right view of the 8, the Eightfold Path, the nature of existence, and all of these things. There's one really interesting here coming. I can't wait to get. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's a really interesting one here that really makes Buddhism really is very similar to Hinduism. If you just take the 330 million gods out. If you go from 330 million gods to no gods, it's very similar, but there's one major difference involving the self. So, right intention, first thing on the Eightfold Path, right speech, which Buddhism is all about morality. A lot of the ethical principles would mimic the second half of the law of the 10 Commandments. I mean, which is not surprising, right? Because the law of God is written on our hearts. Even having a conscience is part of being created in God's image, means the morality of God is planted in us. So, right speech, right action, right livelihood, earning a living in a way that does not cause harm or cause violence or deceit or destruction to others. So honesty, responsibility is very important in Buddhism. Right effort, which is really talking about a disciplined practice of shaping the mind, trying to really prevent unwholesome states of mind that from arising and abandoning ones that have arisen. Right mindfulness, which is, man, you hear this one a lot. I didn't even realize this comes from Buddhism, but you hear about mindfulness, um, being fully aware of the present moment. People talk about that all the time. It comes right out of Buddhism. And it's not that it's a wrong or sinful bad thing. You know, I mean, for example, are you really sitting here listening to me, or are you thinking about what your grocery list, what you got to go buy for next week, or during worship today? I mean, mindfulness and being present in the moment in worship will be an important thing today and a good thing. But under this, this kind of awareness helps a person see more clearly and helps bring them to awareness of reality. Right concentration, which refers to deep mental focus developed in meditation. So Buddhism, like some forms of Hinduism, places a real high value on meditation, which just incidentally, I mean, I think if you've grown up around evangelical Christianity, Eastern mysticism, meditation, we're all like a little bit wary about that because, altered states of mind and focus to get in touch with reality. What you find is, remember what we said, that through these false gods and false religions, the demons are at work. And so, getting in a altered state of mind to try to become aware of reality might get you in touch with a demon. I mean, literally. There's the spiritual warfare going on in reality. But there is Christian meditation, biblical Christian meditation. Psalm 1, right? Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. So for Christians, meditation is not empty your mind of all thoughts and feelings and suffering and try to connect with ultimate reality. It's meditation is focusing your mind on Christ and the truth of his word. Uh,
Is this legalistic in that you're responsible for your own
I would say so. Yeah, definitely.
So do they, is their goal to become a god?
No, no, there's no progression to deity. They really don't believe nirvana is the ultimate goal, which this is weird. And it's really my next thing. So, the yes.
One thing to
Uh-huh.
think of real quick is Scripture says, "Do not be conformed to this world."
Yes.
Right off the bat, no, I don't want
Mm-hmm.
the reality of this world.
Right.
I want my mind brings us back to you keep saying right. So in Buddhism,
Yes.
what is their
Right.
authority?
Yep.
God himself? Is it our own conscience?
Yeah, it really is they do believe that, and this is under my list of how it compares to Christianity, reality is their source of authority. And you can discover it, by knowing the noble truths, by following the Eightfold Path. So that's what it can be confirmed to you by becoming aware or enlightenment.
Right, is there a list to what that is, or can mine be different than Carrie's?
I think, most of what I've seen, they have. I think there are different disciplines and sects within Buddhism that have some differences, but I don't really know what degree. I don't know to what degree it's just kind of like your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. I do think a lot of that is there's just a lot of common morality that we would agree with our moral right and wrong, that they agree with as well.
But it comes back to him writings. This eightfold. This is the right path. I got the right road signs.
Yeah.
So it goes back to a man-made.
It is a man-made religion, and this comes down to, I heard one teacher say this, and when I heard this, it really stuck with me. And y'all have heard me repeat this. And anything I've ever said that was helpful, I've read or heard someone else teach it, But it goes like this: is every other religion, you have a prophet or a leader who comes and says, "I'm here to show you the way to truth." Whereas in Christianity, Jesus came and said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." Just fundamentally different. The big unique thing about Buddhism, contrary to Hinduism, Hinduism says we have to get in touch with our inner self, and usually your inner self is one with the Brahman. Our inner self is one with ultimate reality. Buddhism says there is no inner self. That self is an illusion. Hinduism has your true inner self and the ego. Buddhism says there is no there is no soul. um, and freedom comes from realizing this. Yes, that's right.
your soul becomes existence.
That's right. Um, Buddhism has karma and samsara, just like Hinduism. Karma being the, consequences of actions, and constantly the things I do now. And this is why it's so moralistic and legalistic. And don't forget, let's not forget that legalism, that's the default mode of the human heart. We either see the rules and say, not me. It's a response to the rules. I will not. That's a legal spirit. It's a legal view of God. I will not have his rules. Or you say, oh, rules. I love these. I will follow all the rules and probably make some extra ones, and then I'll know. Right, right. It's me in control. It's me. And really, at the base of it is, if I perform well at these things, I can achieve. In Buddha, I can achieve enlightenment. But Christianity has legalism all day long. We're struggling every day, probably falling off the horse one side or the other of, I'm not going to follow his rules, or I'm going to use his rules to gain his favor. In Christianity, it's, I get control because I do such a good job of keeping the rules. Now God owes me. So every human, legalism is an aspect of every human heart and its own project for control and self-salvation. Buddhism has, again, samsara, which is that cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And the goal of Buddhism is not just, it's really not to get a better, it's not to work my way up from a roach to a caterpillar to a cat to a cow to a human to a prince. It is the ultimate goal is liberation from samsara altogether, which is called nirvana. Nirvana is the extinguishing of craving, ignorance, and attachment. Now, this is really interesting. I tried to really dig into this. Um, in Hinduism, you escape samsara and the cycle of reincarnation by becoming one with the divine. So there's this maybe a sense of eternal bliss with that. But in Buddhism, since there is no eternal self or eternal soul, they can't, they try to, there is no, they try to describe the eternal state. And one view they have of it is, well, it's just, this goes beyond any human comprehension to explain what it is. Now, it's not eternal joy in the presence of the divine. It's not that. One of the common metaphors they use is and I mean, how futile this is you achieve enlightenment, you achieve that full awareness. It's like a flame that finally burns out and ceases to exist. It's just really hopeless, except for the hope would be escaping awareness of pain and suffering. All right. Now, we talked about authority, where their sense of truth comes from. There is no creator God or divine revelation. The Buddha's teachings help, but they're just help people get in touch with not divine reality, but ultimate reality. His teachings are called the Dharma, and they're a guide for understanding. Their concept of God, there are some forms of Buddhism which believe in little deities, but there is no this is the true and living God. It really is not a religion based around the worship of a God. Their view of man, what is man's greatest problem? It's not sin against a holy God. It's ignorance and the desires that come from ignorance. So if we were fully enlightened, we would not have these desires that lead to frustration or dissatisfaction. Salvation in Buddhism, it's liberation from suffering and the cycle of rebirth. But it's not obtained. There is no atonement or forgiveness. It just, if you follow the Eightfold Path well enough, you can attain enlightenment. Who is Jesus in Buddhism? Essentially nothing. Some Buddhists would think of Jesus as a teacher who achieved a higher degree of enlightenment than other people. Nothing more, nothing less. Not the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, not God manifest in the flesh. So he's not really even a thing. Uh, so
So, Pastor,
yes,
if they're untethered from a soul, they don't believe that. So really, all the enlightenment is what we would call the flesh. They have only the flesh. They have only what they're wearing and their own consciousness now, and that's it.
I think that's right. But I don't even know how to explain it in terms of their worldview very well. And I think even they get a little vague with it from what I've seen, is that sense of self is an illusion. And so they don't believe they are nothing, or that existence is an illusion. Um,
Reminds me of that verse, in this life only hope,
yeah,
and that would be it.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Years ago, did any of y'all know Pastor Jamie Tucker? He's a friend of mine. He was a pastor up a little church up in between Chula, Irwinville, and Osceola and Nowheresville, north of here. He went to work for Heart Cry, the Heart Cry Missionary Society, and he met a Vietnamese guy here who was running one of the nail salons, and me and him went and were working with them for a little while. Um, that guy got kind of tied up in the prosperity gospel, which was sad. But yeah. So, but I do think, there's no telling nail salons, whoever, whatever else, people that are caught up in this false religion that's going to lead to an eternity of not of enlightenment or of forgetting the self. The Bible teaches that there is an eternal soul, and not just an eternal soul, but that when Christ returns, there will be a resurrection of the body, the just and the unjust, and that there will be eternal conscious joy for those who are in Christ, and eternal conscious suffering for those who are outside of Christ. That is huge. And we ought to have a huge burden for people who don't know Christ and look for opportunities. I do think, and I know often conservatives get up in arms about illegal immigration. And I don't agree with illegal immigration. I think we're a nation of laws and we should abide by laws. But also, step back and look at the bigger picture. Maybe some people have come from other countries because we haven't gone to them with the gospel. So I just think we need to be aware of people around us who need to go, and have a burden for people who don't know Christ. Amen?